Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. Can everyone hear me okay? If you can hear me, just do a wave or... All right, sounds good. Thank you. On behalf of all the organizers of the Africa Day at the High Level Political Forum 2026, I am pleased to welcome you to our virtual pre-event at the technical level dedicated to the theme of maintaining the momentum, transformative and coordinated actions for the 2030 Agenda and Agenda 2063. My name is Oyebanke Abejiri, although most people call me Banke, and I am an Economic Affairs Officer in the Macroeconomics, Finance, Governance and Planning Division of the United Nations Economic Commission for Africa. And it is my great pleasure to be your moderator today. Before we start, I would like to mention that this meeting is supported by live captions, which can be configured to provide real-time translation in your preferred language. I would like to call on our colleagues from the Office of the Special Advisor on Africa to walk us through how this would work so that we can have effective translation throughout the course of the meeting. Over to you for taking us through.
Thank you so much, Oyebanke. My name is Mohuna Haindonko. I'm from the Office of the Special Advisor on Africa. If you would allow me, I'll share my screen so I can walk you through on how to use the live captions, which you'll also be able to then translate into the language that you prefer. Okay. I'm sharing my screen. Okay. So on the top, you'll have the top ribbon. You'll see the option More. This is where you click to select the captions. So under Language and Speech, it will say Show Live Captions. You click on Show Live Captions. And then at the bottom of your screen, you'll see the live captions come up. It reads the language, the spoken language in the room right now, which is English. So if you want to translate the current captions that are showing in English, you can click on the cogwheel, go to Language Settings, and then enable Translate To, and then translate it to the language you prefer, for example, French. As soon as you select the language you prefer to translate to, you'll see that the captions then change to French. Very important, do not change the spoken language in this meeting, because this is basically the language that's spoken in the room. If you change this, it will mess up the captions. So just focus purely on the translate to, and then translate it to whatever language you prefer to have your captions in. All right, then, thank you. We'll keep posting the instructions also in the chat. For those that join a bit later, they can follow the instructions in the chat. Thank you so much, and over.
Thank you very much for that. Can you please post the instructions in both English and French? That will be most helpful. All right, I'd like to say that today's virtual meeting is being co-organized by the UN Office of the Special Advisor on Africa, the United Nations Economic Commission for Africa, the United Nations Development Programme, and the African Union Commission and the African Development Bank. And we thank all the co-organizers for bringing us here together today. The purpose of today's meeting is twofold. First, we would like to have a frank discussion at the technical level among the voluntary national review focal points about what has worked and what can be scaled up, and what still needs to be addressed in order to fast-track the joint implementation of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development and Agenda 2063. Now, this is an informal platform for sharing experiences and best practices and lessons learned from the VNR processes. Second, this meeting also helps us prepare for the Africa Day at the HLPF in-person ministerial meeting that will be taking place on the 15th of July 2026 at the margins of the HLPF in New York. A brief technical summary of the key insights from today's meeting will inform the preparations for the ministerial meeting. Now, the program today is very packed and it's very rich, and it will feature brief technical presentations by the co-organizers and interventions from experts from the African VNR countries, drawing upon their recent VNR preparations. One thing to clarify from the outset, kindly note that this is not a formal meeting, and the experts presenting and intervening in our meeting today are not representing their countries officially. Rather, they will be speaking in their own personal capacity, drawing on their experiences and best practices from the VNR processes. Our aim is therefore to foster an informal exchange in the lead up to the official VNR, VLR presentations during the HLPL. To maintain the interactive nature of our conversation, we will alternate between the group presentations at the beginning and also the open mic interactive conversations. At the end of the program, we will also address questions and comments from the audience. You're also kindly encouraged to use the question and answers and chat boxes to submit your questions, and we will monitor these questions and share them with the panelists as we go along. Without further ado, I would like to move to the first part of the program, and I would like to invite Mr. Jean-Paul Adam, Director, Policy, Monitoring and Advocacy at the United Nations Office of the Special Advisor on Africa, to deliver a brief presentation on a call to action, moving from vision to action for Africa Water Vision 2063 and policy. Now, this will be followed by Mr. Utku Texos, Program Management Officer from the same office on Africa's VNR Snapshots 2026. Mr. Jean-Paul Adam, over to you to open us up and give us your presentation.
Thank you very much, Banke, and good morning to New York, good afternoon and good evening to everyone following the discussion from across the continent and elsewhere. It's a great pleasure for me to also, on behalf of the Office of the Special Advisor on Africa, to welcome you all to participate in this discussion. I would like to thank all of the co-organizers from within the UN system, but also our partners, the African Union Commission and the African Development Bank, and of course, all of the member states who have put together their voluntary national reviews, and who we can see, and we will see a little bit more in detail from their own presentations, the ambition that is being expressed across Africa. But I think even more importantly, how African countries are reacting to what is a very difficult moment in terms of development, in terms of multilateralism, and in terms of geopolitics. But the response is focused on African ownership of its own resources and the ability to direct those resources into sustainable development, which is transformative for citizens and populations. So in this brief presentation, I will be outlining a few things. Firstly, I will be outlining a theory of change represented by what we are calling strategic asset management, an approach for African countries to precisely claim ownership of their resources and to be able to reinvest their surpluses. And we will also reflect on how this applies to the African Union theme of the year, which is on water management and sanitation, and how a strategic asset management approach can help transform this sector, and reflect what this means also for the voluntary national reviews of all African countries this year. Firstly, speaking to the subject of strategic asset management for African development, we start from the principle that there is too often a narrative of scarcity around Africa. There is the impression that Africa has insufficient resources, but fundamentally, the strategic asset management approach arises from the fact that we need to treat national and regional endowments as an integrated portfolio whose value depends fundamentally on how economic, financial data and resource flows are governed. And in practice, strengthening sovereignty over these flows requires a focused set of measures. These include the enhancement of tax administration to better capture tax, including from digital activities, renegotiating and enforcing resource contracts to retain a greater share of value, establishing clear data governance regimes to ensure domestic ownership and mobilization of data, and deepening local capital markets. And this can only happen also by reinforcing the African Continental Free Trade Area. So these measures contribute to expanding fiscal space, building capacity, and enabling a shift from scarcity to strategic management of abundance. Referring to the figure that is on your screen, you will note that we have estimated there are around $2.1 trillion of uncontrolled flows and missed opportunities across the continent. This can be further broken down into 4 asset classes. Firstly, in terms of financial assets, where unmobilized flows represent around $678 billion, around $200 billion in terms of unmobilized opportunities around natural and physical assets, around $2 billion in terms of institutional human capital assets, and around $1.2 billion in terms of technological data and outer space assets. The focus of strategic asset management is about, in a very strategic manner, identifying the reinvestable surplus that can be generated from Africa's resources. This reinvestable surplus being put to work in terms of productive transformation, and this is particularly around value addition and improving the value chain. And this must be further reinvested in stronger state capability and public trust, which then leads to the opportunity for greater bargaining power and economic sovereignty, which is also dependent on having appropriate availability of data and using this to make strategic decisions, which then improves the capacity for a reinvestable surplus. This therefore creates a positive feedback loop, which allows us to move away from the focus on what we perceive as Africa is missing to rather managing what Africa actually has. And this is particularly critical in an era where there is falling official development assistance, and therefore the imperative is to mobilize more resources from African countries themselves. A defining theme of the voluntary national reviews from all of the 19 countries that are presenting this year is a renewed focus on the ways in which domestic resources can be mobilized. We commend African countries for their progress being made to that end, and the UN system is geared towards supporting these processes so that we can move towards economic transformation aligned with Agenda 2063, and particularly the second 10-year implementation plan. If we can move to the next slide, we can now look at this in the context of the implementation of the theme for the African Union theme for 2026, which has been presented by the Office of the Special Advisor on Africa and its partners who are also involved in convening this meeting through what was called the Africa Dialogue Series. And the Africa Dialogue Series was aimed at moving from the African Water Vision and Policy, which was adopted in 2025, towards the implementation, and in particular, treating water as a strategic asset and looking at water and sanitation for life by harnessing water resources for the Africa we want. We can go to the next slide. In terms of the priorities that were identified as part of the discussion in the Africa Dialogue Series, firstly, situating water in terms of its real strategic importance, that water and sanitation are foundational pillars for Africa's long-term socioeconomic transformation and resilience, and aligned through this continental vision with the African Union's theme for 2026. The Africa Dialogue Series was also focused on a multi-stakeholder dialogue, reflecting the collective responsibility involving participation of governments, of the United Nations system, of course, of the African Union, of civil society, and strong ownership of by and for young people, with also a recognition of the particular role that women play, not only in the management of water resources, but also in ensuring how the reinvestment in water resources can be empowering for women across the continent, and therefore critical for Africa to make use of its demographic dividend. The call to action that has emerged from the Africa Dialogue series emphasizes urgent concrete policy and investment actions for sustainable water management. We can go to the next slide. So the core message is water is a strategic economic asset, which must be governed as a sovereign economic asset central to national development and long-term transformation strategies. Quite often, water is treated as a common resource, but without clear definition of the responsibilities, and also with limited visibility in some cases of how the management of this sector should be benefiting populations and contributing towards inclusion. In particular, the economic role of water is often underestimated. Water underpins agriculture, which is the driving force not for economic productivity, but also for livelihoods and jobs across the continent. It is also critical for energy, with numerous countries being able to deliver cheap and affordable energy through hydro resources. It is essential for industrialization if we are to move for more value addition, and particularly across the food chain. It means access to water and sanitation in a systematic manner. The increased urbanization of the continent both poses challenges in terms of making sure that water is available in the spaces where the majority of African populations are moving, while also addressing the urban-rural divide, recognizing that particularly in countries that are facing conflicts, the availability of water is one of the key issues that is affecting migration and further placing challenges on security risks across the continent. The health implications are obvious and critical, while we must also look at developing water in a way which enhances climate resilience across the continent. Addressing the challenges and gaps mean recognizing that the urbanization elements that I've already mentioned and climate risks pose significant risks, and investing in this water infrastructure is key to building long-term resilience, while strategic asset management as an approach emphasizes long-term investment and life cycle management of water assets to create value and promote resilience and growth. We can move to the next slide, and this identifies the priority actions that have come out of the Africa Dialogue series and which are situated within the call to action. Firstly, strengthening governance and data. This means reinforcing the institutions for water management, both at national level and in many cases also at regional level, focusing as well on decisions being based on evidence that is generated by data that is also controlled by these institutions, and using data systems which are aligned with national priorities. Secondly, mobilizing financing at scale, and here we commend the leadership of the African Development Bank in mobilizing resources and identifying resources available for African countries, focusing on public investment as governments need to drive this process, but also bringing in innovative financial tools, including green and blue bonds, to support water development projects. Thirdly, ensuring that there is integrated cross-sectoral planning, where water management must be integrated with energy and food systems, urban development, climate adaptation, and resilience. Fourthly, a focus on social inclusion and participation, ensuring that there are meaningful roles for women and youth in governance and decision-making, and also enhancing the role, therefore, for youth labs. And finally, water diplomacy is essential for peace and security across the continent. We are seeing that in areas where transboundary water cooperation is delivered effectively, that this helps to address, for example, some of the pressures that come from managing the use from farmers, from pastoralists, and ensuring that this minimizes opportunities, minimizes the risk of conflicts, and also ensures economic integration and equal opportunity, equal economic opportunity across regions. So thank you very much, and we look forward to your further feedback on the strategic asset management context, linking this to water systems or other resources. And this will be followed, I think, by my colleague Utku, who will delve into a little bit more detail the voluntary national reviews. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Adam. Can we give him a round of applause virtually, wherever you are, for the excellent presentation on the Africa Water Vision 2063 and policy. Your insights highlighted water as a strategic asset for Africa, its critical role across multiple sectors, and the actions required to fully harness its potential for sustainable development. Without further ado, we have a slight change in plans, and I would like to call our next presenter, who will be Ms. Botho Kebabonye Bayendi, Director, Office of Strategic Planning and Delivery at the African Union Commission. She will be delivering a presentation on the theme, Accelerating the Joint Implementation of Agenda 2063 and the SDGs through Transformative and Coordinated Actions. Ms. Bayendi, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Madam Benki. My name is Charles Wangadia. I will be representing Madam Botho, who is unable to be part of this very important discussion. Allow me then to make that presentation on her behalf. And sorry for the slight change of program. It is because we have another engagement here in Lusaka, where we are undertaking domestication of the second 10-year implementation plan of Agenda 2063 in Lusaka. The presentation that I'll be taking us through is basically titled From Planning to Delivery, and ensuring that we accelerate the joint implementation of Agenda 2063 and the SDGs through transformative and coordination action. I don't know whether you are in position to see my presentation. Please, Madam Benki, let me know if you are in
Yes, we can
position to
see
see
it, my brother Charles. We can see it very well. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Just a quick reminder of ourselves, of the African Union vision, which is that of an integrated, prosperous and peaceful Africa that is driven by its own citizens and representing a dynamic force in the global arena. So whatever we are doing at the African Union Commission is basically hinged on that vision of the African Union. But just also to briefly remind ourselves of Agenda 2063 and its strategic plans. We are in the second decade of implementing implementing Agenda 2063. We had a decade, the first decade, which was running from 2014 to 2023, and this we dubbed it as a decade of convergency. Now we are in the second decade, which we have dubbed the decade of acceleration. So we have quite 5 of these plans leading us to 2063. In the second decade of implementing Agenda 2063, we have identified these 7 moonshots, which we are all aware of, ranging from prosperity to Africa being a strong, influential player in the global arena. And these have also, we have had catalytic interventions identified for each of the moonshots, where we are talking about Africa's prosperity. And here we are saying that, no, we need to up our game in terms of industrialization, agricultural productivity, and social productivity. In terms of partnerships, we need to, enhance data and statistics. It goes on for all the 7 moonshots of Agenda 2063. So why is this discussion mattering at the moment then? Like I mentioned earlier, Africa is entering or has entered into the second decade of acceleration. And during this period, we have had to prepare the first biennial report on Agenda 2063, where 44 member states participated in this reporting. At the same time, like we have had, there are countries that are presenting their VNR, and 19 of them are African countries. And on top of that, we have financing for development agenda following the Sevilla commitment. So the key message here then is that Africa has built strong policy foundations. This is emerging from the first biennial report. And the challenge is now implementation at scale. I also wish to share with us some of the findings of this biennial report that I'm talking about. And basically here we are saying that Africa has presented moderately positive but uneven pattern of performance across the 7 moonshots with an overall implementation score of 53%. This 53% is the average for all the moonshots. But when it comes to moonshot 3, which is talking about public institutions, we see a record performance of close to 64%. And this one reflects relatively strong progress in strengthening governance frameworks, digitalization of public service, enhancing planning systems. When it comes to the enablers, we see that the continent in the second decade, which we are calling acceleration, has registered 79% performance in terms of enablers. And here we are talking about strategic partnerships, coordination, and policy coherence. So the key takeaway here is that Africa has achieved a strong institutional alignment, but must now accelerate implementing both Agenda 2063 and the SDGs. We are also saying that in the first 10-year implementation plan, the reality was that when we were talking to our member states, we are taking 2 different agendas, the SDGs and the Agenda 2063. But now we are saying that this should change, and it has already changed, and we are trying to implement the joint framework that was signed sometime back in 2018 between our principals, which called for joint implementation of the 2 agendas in terms of advocacy, in terms of integration, in terms of research, data, reporting, trade, peace, and financing. And we believe that implementing that framework will go a long way to ensure that these 2 agendas, which are not actually competing, are received well within our member states. And so we are saying that going forward now, we can see we are doing joint implementation and joint reporting. The biennial report that I'm talking about has identified some gaps in terms of implementation. And these are in terms of planning and budgeting disconnect. We see that Agenda 2063 priorities are not yet fully reflected in the budgets. It comes to limited fiscal space. We see that debt pressures are reducing development investments. We see the weak implementation capacity, especially at sectoral and sub-national levels. The data gaps, which pose a challenge when it comes to monitoring and reporting. The climate and conflict, which are increasingly reversing development gains. And we see that these same bottlenecks are reflected in many of the VNR processes. So the Agenda 2063 findings provide practical evidence for strengthening this year's VNR. But we have also identified 5 game changers for accelerated delivery, drawing from the biennial report. And here we are saying that we should move from planning to implementation. And this is for both Agenda 2063 and the SDGs. Financing development differently. We should strengthen domestic resource mobilization and leverage on innovating financing. And then accelerating regional integration, taking advantage of the CFTA, which has been are accepted by all African Union member states, and then digital transformation, where we're talking about improving public service delivery and monitoring, and then data revolution, strengthening national statistical systems, and digital reporting. So these align closely with the objectives of this meeting that we are having today. We have also seen that we need to prioritize whatever we are doing, and areas that we think and believe are key include employment, inclusive growth, food security systems, industrialization and value addition, domestic resource mobilization, and then peace and security. So our recommendations basically to close the planning and budgetary delivery gap, increase the domestic resource mobilization, the CFTA that I've talked about, the peace and security, the national data systems, and strengthening partnerships around implementation rather than projects. So in conclusion, ladies and gentlemen, we are saying that the next biannual reporting, the next reporting should look into financing, implementation, delivering results, measuring impact, and learning from one another, like what is being offered in the VNRs. So maintaining the momentum, therefore, means moving from commitment to delivery and to transformation. With that, allow me to thank you so very much for your kind attention, and back to you, Madam Benki.
Thank you very much, Mr. Wangadia. Can we give him a virtual round of applause? Charles, we are clapping for you. Thank you for the insightful presentation on Agenda 2063. Indeed, the priority areas and identified game changers provide a clear roadmap for accelerating progress towards the achievement of both agendas. Colleagues, we note that many are having issues with translation. I'll therefore like to call upon our colleague again from OSA to walk us through how the translation works and for her to answer any questions that you might have. Over to you, please, to let us know again how to work on the translation.
Thank you so much, Oyabanka. I think we might have a problem with the translated captions. I'm going to give the instructions again on how to enable it, but I also need somehow confirmation to see if you're able to see translate to, because I think that's where the problem lies. I'm going to share my screen again. One moment. Okay, so again, under more, this is the three dots here, more, and top on the top ribbon. You click on more and then click on language and speech, show live captions. The captions should then pop up here at the bottom. And then if you click on the cogwheel, your language settings should appear here on the right. You have there's the top option, the spoken language in this meeting. This is what's currently being spoken in the room. That does not need to be changed. What does need to be changed is translate to. Now, from what I'm gathering in the chat, some people are not able to see this option. This might just be, unfortunately, then the platform, a platform error or a mistake. If you're not able to see this option, because this option is then what will allow you to translate the captions that you see at the bottom of my screen. When I click on it to enable it, and then I select French, it will then translate it to French. Or if I select Arabic, it will then continue to translate those same captions into Arabic. We do apologize if you do not see the translate to option. Unfortunately, then you won't be able to translate these captions. And this is then beyond our control at this given moment. And apologies. Thank you, and over.
All right. Thank you very much for that. And apologies if you continue to have any issues. Now, without further ado, would like to move to a session which we call Setting the Stage and Priorities and Actions from the 12th session of the Africa Regional Forum on Sustainable Development, ARFSD. We are honored to be joined today by Ms. Vimila Kulin, Assistant Permanent Secretary at the Ministry of Agro-Industry, Food Security, Blue Economy and Fisheries, to represent Mauritius as the ARFSD 12 Chair. Ms. Kulin, the floor is yours to share with us the outcomes of the forum. Ms. Kulin? Okay. Ms. Cullen, over to you, please.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Please go ahead.
Sorry, I apologize. I have some technical issues as well as some health issues. I will try my best to give this short presentation. Unfortunately, I don't have any PowerPoint presentation. So, good morning and good evening for some representatives who are joining us from different parts of the world. I am very honored to be present today at this online meeting in preparation to the Africa Day 2026, which is scheduled in some 15 days. And Mauritius was proudly represented by the Junior Minister, Honorable Fabrice David, at the Africa Regional Forum on Sustainable Development at its 12th session held in May 2026. And luckily, Mauritius was elected as chair of the forum. This is a privilege for Mauritius to be elected for the first time as chair of this very important forum. And we are very honored to be representing Africa at the Africa Day. So coming straight to to the focus of this presentation, the 12th session of the forum was held under the theme Turning the Tide, Transformative and Coordinated Actions for the 2030 Agenda and Agenda 2063. This is very closely aligned with that of the 2026 meeting of the High-Level Political Forum on Sustainable Development. And there were some 3 high-level panels during the forum. Number 1 was on scaling up a transformative and coordinated actions. And number 2, very important, unlocking finance for climate resilience. And the high-level panel 3, which is achieving full employment and decent work for all, poverty reduction, etc. And there were many parallel meetings as well as 4 roundtables focused also on very key thematic areas. Now, what were the key messages from the forum? So very first message and very important one is transforming commitments into action. There had been lots of talks. I think everywhere around the world we talk a lot, but less action. So this one, the very strong message that was passed on to all delegates is transform commitments into action. With less than 5 years remaining to achieving the SDGs, delegates stressed that incremental progress is no longer sufficient. Governments and partners must scale up transformative coordinated action to accelerate implementation of both the 2030 Agenda and Agenda 2063. Secondly, we should continue to prioritize sustainable development goals, especially, there were 5 important SDGs that were the focus during the forum. SDG 6, which is clean water and sanitation, and we heard from our colleague a few minutes earlier. SDG 7, affordable and clean energy. SDG 9, industry, innovation, infrastructure. Is SDG 11, sustainable cities and communities. SDG 17, partnerships for the goals. Number 3, we should accelerate transformative actions. Incremental improvement will not be enough. Governments, regional institutions, and partners should pursue integrated, innovative, and transformative solutions that simultaneously advance the 2030 Agenda and Agenda 2063. And coming again to our most favorite one and most important aspect is finance. So the fourth message is we should close and advocate for closing the financing gap. Sustainable development requires substantially greater investment, which can be achieved through stronger domestic resource mobilization, better access to affordable finance, increased climate finance, private sector investment, and reforms to the international financial architecture. As well, the fifth message would be we should build climate resilience while driving economic transformation. Government should support resilient infrastructure, renewable energy, sustainable industrialization, innovation, food and water security, climate adaptation, creating jobs while strengthening resilience to climate shocks. Number six, we should leverage science, technology, and innovation. We can't have policies without aligning science, technology, and implementing innovation. So, digital technologies, data systems, research, and innovation were identified as essential for improving productivity, public services, and evidence-based decision making. Number seven, we should strengthen partnerships and regional cooperation. Achieving the SDGs requires stronger collaboration among governments, regional organizations, development partners, the private sector, civil society, women, and youth, with implementation supported through shared accountability and partnerships. We should ensure no one is left behind. The forum strongly emphasizes inclusive development that prioritizes women, youth, vulnerable groups, and local communities while expanding decent work, social protection, and equal access to opportunities. So all these aids I know there are much more than that, but we have been asked to make a very short 5-minute presentation. These are the strongest and very important messages of this forum. And overall, I would say that this forum, it calls for urgent, coordinated, and transformative action to indeed turn the tide on sustainable development in Africa. The emphasis was on implementation rather than just ambition. With financing, partnerships, innovation, and accountable delivery identify are the critical enablers for achieving both the SDGs and a Agenda 2063. With that, I end and say thank you to all of you for your attention.
All right. Thank you, Miss Cullen. Please give her a round of applause
Thank you.
virtually
Thank
from
you.
wherever you are. All right. Thank you for sharing the outcomes of the ARFSD 12 with us. We take careful note of the key messages and recommendations, particularly the need to move from commitments to action, to maintain the SDGs as a priority, and to scale up transformative solutions to accelerate implementation. Thank you once again. At this juncture,
Thank you.
I would now like to invite Mr. Utku Texos, Program Management Officer from the Office of the Special Advisor on Africa, OSA, to present the 2026 VNR snapshots from African countries. Mr. Texos, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Banky, and thank you very much for your flexibility in the program. We had a couple of moving parts. This was actually meant to be the second half of the presentation that my director delivered. So let me share with you a few brief insights from the rest of the presentation. Okay, you see my screen, I suppose.
Yes, we do.
All right, thank you. Okay. First of all, I would like to explain to you the background of what we are trying to do. As you know, the African VNR countries, we have a record number, 19 countries that have presented their VNRs, many of them second, third, or fourth timers. A very uniquely strong field this year. And as usual, ahead of these presentations, the countries do share their key messages a couple of months in advance of finalizing their reports. So what we have done is an attempt to turn these into a snapshot of key messages and emerging trends. And what we have done is a relatively simple exercise. We have put together these presentations, the key messages from this year, and compared them to the presentations from the last year. Excuse me, my shared screen is not acting properly. I'm going to stop this presentation once again, just to make sure that I can share it with you properly. Yes. The previous slide. Yes. Okay, this was the page. So basically, what we have done is the following. We have taken the key messages from this year's VNRs preparations, and we have compared and contrasted them to the previous years. However, whenever that presentation might have been a couple of years before, and then try to put them in the form of a structured, comparable analysis of the sustainable development priorities and how they've evolved since the last time we looked at these. Now, in doing that, we have, in identifying the key trends and the key messages, we have also used the latest available technology, the AI-driven large language models and text analytics. And we've identified 6 prominent themes from each document and mapped them against the relevant SDGs. We also looked at how the thematic continuity came into play, which is the extent to which the priorities and the policy emphases and have changed throughout the course of, and the narratives have changed across various review cycles. And we try to present that visually in the form of either they have been sustained or they have been evolved, which sustained means consistent and prominent featuring of the same themes across cycles. Evolved means reframed, expanded, or adapted based on changing context and new priorities that came into play. Now, let's be very clear, these are not assessments of progress or performance, but rather of continuity and change of focus and key messages and trends. And last but not least, we have presented these in the form of heat maps, put them in 4 or 5 different fields: economic and fiscal development, governance and institutions, social and human capital, and climate and environment. And we've shown the most frequent in with bigger boxes, reflecting the increased frequency of the mention of the themes, and the more mention a theme gets, the darker the color will be. Now, we have put this as a package together for all 19 countries. We prepared them in English and in French, and we are going to share them with you after the meeting. Here, I'm just giving you a brief teaser of what it looks like, and we are sharing our contact details as well. After the meeting, we are going to finalize this, and we're going to turn these into this is a static picture. We're going to turn these into a dynamic dashboard, again with contributions from you. And we would like to receive any comments, suggestions, and feedbacks to improve the product and make it more useful to you. So let me go to show you 2 countries. On the left side, you see Rwanda. On the right side, you see Algeria. I have picked these almost randomly. I know there are member states representatives, the focal points from all the other countries. We haven't had colleagues registering from these countries. So in their absence, at least I wanted to have some mention of their VNR participation. Therefore, I picked those things. If you look at the review of Rwanda, for instance, on the left-hand panel, we are talking about strong and social, macroeconomic and social progress under the national strategy for transformation in line with Rwanda's Vision 2050. So a couple of things jump out at looking at the Rwanda's presentation. First, we are talking about strong and inclusive growth under Vision 2050. Growth averages 9% from 2021 to 2025, which is a significantly strong growth. Also, the poverty has come down from almost 40% to 27.4% in 2024. On SDGs 6 and 7, we are talking about, near universal access to basic services having been achieved. Water is almost 90%, electricity is almost 85%, and investments in clean energy and infrastructure are highlighted in these VNR reports. And last but not least, we are seeing a pattern where financing the transformation and the regional integration through integrated national financing frameworks and the Made in Rwanda agenda, which aims to turn the country into a regional hub. And at the bottom, you see the heat map that I mentioned, and right in the middle are the identification of which themes remained sustained or evolved from 2023 to 2026. Now, allow me to switch to French briefly. En ce qui concerne les points clés d'Algérie, en fait, il s'agit d'un modèle de développement inclusif et centré sur l'humain. Ça veut dire que Algérie place la protection sociale et l'autonomisation des jeunes et égalité de sexe au cœur de ses politiques publiques. Alors, il s'agit aussi d'accès quasi universel aux services essentiels et d'une transition énergétique. Plus de 98% de la population est raccordée au réseau d'eau potable, ODD6. Il s'agit aussi des investissements importants dans l'énergie solaire et d'hydrogène vert pour la diversification énergétique. Et finalement, on voit aussi parmi les messages clés, il s'agit des investissements massifs sur souveraineté économique, industrielle et numérique, aussi pour renforcer la résilience économique. Et vous voyez aussi la continuité de thèmes d'un cycle à l'autre au milieu et aussi des concepts récurrents dans les messages clés. I think with this presentation, I'm going to stop sharing my screen. As I mentioned, we are going to share these documents with all participants, all member states presenting their VNRs. For you. We will continue building on this until the in-person meeting that takes place in July 15, and we look forward to your comments and suggestions. With that, I'm passing the microphone back to my colleague Banke for continuing our meeting as per the program. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Textos. A round of applause for him. Thank you so much for your insightful remarks to frame today's meeting in a broader context, specifically giving us the highlights from the VNR countries. We would now like to turn to our focal points from African VNR countries. Notre première intervenante est Madame Aminata Bousso du Sénégal. Madame Bousso, nous serions ravis d'entendre vos principaux enseignements tirés de l'expérience du Sénégal en matière d'examens nationaux volontaires et d'en apprendre davantage sur le préparatif de la conférence des Nations Unies sur l'eau de 2026, co-organisée par le Sénégal et les Émirats arabes unis. La parole est à vous. Vous disposez de 5 minutes pour votre intervention. Madame Bousso?
Oui, bonjour, mesdames et messieurs. J'ai partagé ma présentation. Est-ce que vous pouvez la projeter, s'il vous plaît? À Monsieur Outuko.
Un moment, s'il vous plaît. Okay. Présentation du Sénégal. Alors. Madame, j'ai reçu votre message, mais je ne vois pas l'attachement. Le document manque dans le message. Est-ce que
En
vous
fait,
pouvez me l'envoyer encore une fois?
c'est un lien, d'accord, je vous le
C'est un lien,
renvoie.
pardon.
Oui, oui, c'est un lien.
OK. Je vais essayer encore une fois.
Je vous le renvoie tout de suite.
OK.
Vous l'avez?
Alors. OK.
Vous l'avez?
Je le vois, oui, je le vois maintenant. Je suis en train de faire le download. Donne-moi une seconde, s'il vous plaît.
Pardon?
Une seconde.
D'accord.
OK.
C'est bon, on peut y aller?
Oui.
Moi, je ne le vois pas, mais je vais commencer.
Et vous le voyez maintenant?
Mariama, tu vois la présentation. Donc voilà, par rapport au contexte, il faut savoir que le Sénégal participe pour la 3e fois à sa revue nationale volontaire. Donc en 2018 et 2022, le Sénégal avait présenté ses revues nationales volontaires. Donc en plus de cela, chaque année, le Sénégal élabore un rapport sur l'état d'avancement de la mise en œuvre des ODD. Donc le rapport qu'on a l'habitude d'élaborer, c'est un rapport complet sur les 17 ODD. Donc, cette année, le Sénégal a pris l'option, en plus des 5 objectifs de développement durable qui sont retenus pour examen approfondi, le Sénégal va faire un rapport complet sur ces 17 ODD et un examen approfondi sur ces 5 ODD retenus. Donc, sur la dernière décennie 2015-2025. Donc, par rapport au processus de la revue nationale volontaire au Sénégal, il faut savoir que c'est un processus inclusif, participatif, multi-acteurs et multisectoriel. C'est-à-dire que toutes les parties prenantes sont impliquées, la société civile, le secteur privé, donc le niveau central, le niveau territorial, tout le monde est impliqué. Donc, par rapport à la coordination des revues nationales volontaires, donc la coordination administrative est assurée par le ministère en charge des Affaires étrangères et la coordination technique par le ministère en charge de l'économie, des finances et du plan. Donc, par rapport aux bonnes pratiques qui concernent la mise en œuvre des ODD, donc nous avons relevé 5 bonnes pratiques, 5 principales bonnes pratiques, donc la territorialisation des ODD, la stratégie ne laisser personne en rade, la conception d'un indice infranational de suivi des ODD, donc la contribution du volontariat pour la mise en œuvre des ODD au Sénégal et l'accélérateur mondial. Donc, par rapport à la territorialisation des ODD, donc, il faut savoir que le ministère de l'économie, du plan et de la coopération, donc avec le ministère en charge des collectivités territoriales, donc accompagne les collectivités territoriales dans la territorialisation des ODD, donc en leur donnant des guides et des outils pour la domestication des ODD, mais également pour la mise en œuvre des ODD. Donc, en plus de cela, en 2022, donc, le Sénégal a adopté une stratégie nationale de ne laisser personne en rade. Donc, cette stratégie est mise en œuvre au Sénégal et récemment, nous avons procédé à l'évaluation de cette stratégie pour voir où est-ce que le Sénégal en est. Donc, par rapport toujours à la contribution, pour mesurer la contribution des régions par rapport au suivi des ODD, le Sénégal a également élaboré un indice infranational des ODD qui nous permet de mesurer les performances des régions et des territoires. Donc, cet indice est déjà élaboré par l'ANSD avec le ministère de l'Économie. Donc, pour également la mise en œuvre des ODD, donc le volontariat également constitue un apport important. Donc, il y a même un cadre stratégique donc, qui nous permet de voir un peu un cadre qui nous permet de voir un peu la contribution du volontariat dans les politiques publiques. Donc, le Sénégal a recensé 500 000 volontaires dans le pays. Donc, par rapport à l'accélérateur mondial également, en 2023, le Sénégal a adhéré à l'accélérateur mondial sur l'emploi et la protection, qui constitue ainsi un cadre structurant pour accélérer plusieurs ODD, notamment l'ODD 1, l'ODD 2, l'ODD 3, l'ODD 9 et l'ODD 10. Donc, par rapport aux enseignements tirés de la mise en œuvre des ODD au Sénégal, donc, nous avons noté qu'il est important donc d'accélérer la territorialisation des ODD. Donc, il faut renforcer l'alignement des plans locaux de développement avec les ODD. Il faut également augmenter les budgets municipaux sur les cibles ODD. Il faut également promouvoir les financements innovants. L'autre aspect qu'on a enseignement tiré de la mise en œuvre des ODD est le relèvement de la qualité des données. Donc, il est important de renforcer la disponibilité des données, la fiabilité des données, mais également la désagrégation des données pour le suivi efficace. Par rapport aux coordinations et financements également, donc, il faut promouvoir les financements innovants, donc assurer une meilleure coordination intersectorielle. Donc, par rapport toujours aux enseignements tirés, donc, il faut améliorer le partenariat stratégique. Donc, le rôle clé des partenaires publics-privés, la société civile, donc, il faut les promouvoir. Donc, ça permet de réduire les inégalités. Si l'on sait que la société civile joue un rôle important par rapport à l'appropriation des communautés pour les politiques publiques. Voilà, pour accélérer la mise en œuvre des ODD et l'atteinte des ODD à l'horizon 2030 ou au-delà même, donc le Sénégal a identifié 4 leviers majeurs. Donc, la transformation structurelle de l'économie à travers le développement de 8 filières stratégiques. Il faut savoir également que le Sénégal est en train de renforcer sa décentralisation avec l'identification de 8 pôles territoires. Donc, ce renforcement de la décentralisation également va lui permettre d'accélérer les investissements privés. Donc, le privé local, national doit être promu pour accélérer la mise en œuvre des ODD. Par rapport au capital humain, le levier qui est identifié, c'est la refondation du système éducatif. Donc, le Sénégal est en train d'aligner le système éducatif par rapport à nos réalités, par rapport à nos valeurs africaines, par rapport aux valeurs sénégalaises. Donc, il faut également accélérer la couverture sanitaire universelle, c'est important. Donc, il y a une frange importante de la population qui n'a pas accès à la santé de façon gratuite ou avec des réductions. Il faut également passer par l'innovation, donc mettre en œuvre également le compact national de l'eau pour la sécurité de l'eau et renforcer la gouvernance et le financement du secteur. La transition écologique également est un levier d'accélération qui a été identifié par le Sénégal. Donc, le Sénégal est à sa 3e génération de mise en œuvre de la contribution déterminée nationale qui va nous permettre peut-être d'apporter la contribution sur la résilience et la transition écologique. De même, il est important d'accroître la part des énergies renouvelables dans le mix énergétique. Le financement durable également ne sera pas en reste. Donc, il faudra mobiliser des financements durables et innovants à travers le document cadre de financement durable déjà élaboré par le ministère en charge de l'économie et des finances. Il faudra également redynamiser les partenariats à travers la stratégie de coopération. Donc, comme message clé qu'on voudrait faire passer, c'est que la mise en œuvre des ODD donc, passe par la vision Sénégal 2050 qui constitue le socle de l'action publique pour l'agenda 2030. Donc, l'équité territoriale et sociale et l'innovation sera également de mise. Il faudra également accélérer les progrès à partir des priorités d'accélération qui ont été identifiées. Donc, le Sénégal s'engage à nouveau au niveau africain, au niveau mondial, à accélérer ou à mettre en œuvre les ODD. Donc, voilà, mesdames et messieurs, l'économie de ma présentation. Je vous remercie.
Merci beaucoup, Madame Bousso. A round of applause for her. Merci d'avoir partagé avec nous l'expérience du Sénégal. At this moment, I would now like to call on Ms. Anne-Marie Teclair, Sustainability Specialist, Directorate of Regional Integration of Cameroon, to share your reflections with us about some key lessons you learned from your VNR process, and if you can kindly highlight one or two transformative and coordinated actions that you have identified that could help speed up the 2030 Agenda and Agenda 2063 implementation. Mr. Claire, you have the floor for 5 minutes. Thank you.
Bien, merci infiniment pour la parole donnée et merci pour cette occasion que vous nous facilitez de pouvoir échanger sur l'évolution, les améliorations, les défis en matière d'atteinte des objectifs de développement durable par rapport à nos agendas, également l'agenda africain, l'agenda 2063. Donc, du coup, je ne sais pas, j'ai partagé ma présentation. Est-ce qu'il serait possible de la voir sur l'écran? Possible? Vous me suivez?
Bon, une seconde, s'il vous plaît.
Bon, mais en attendant, pour gagner en temps, disons que nous partirons de la structure de l'organisation qui est mise en place pour que le Cameroun puisse participer à l'élaboration des examens nationaux volontaires. Le Cameroun participe cette année, en 2026, pour la 3e fois. La première fois, c'était en 2019, la seconde en 2022. Alors, au niveau national, l'organisme qui coordonne le comité dédié est le ministère de l'économie et aux Nations Unies, c'est le ministère... Ah, merci. Donc, nous passons à la première les slides. Donc, comme je le disais, c'est le ministère de l'économie qui chapeaute le comité dédié. Et puis, au niveau des Nations Unies, c'est généralement le ministre des Relations extérieures qui conduit la délégation. Cette initiative de présentation des examens nationaux nous semble pertinente, surtout pour le Cameroun, parce que les agendas 2030 et 2063 rentrent en droite ligne des piliers de la stratégie nationale de développement du Cameroun 2020-2030. Et ils y sont intégrés, c'est-à-dire les piliers de la stratégie nationale intègrent les axes des deux agendas 2030 et 2063. Il faut dire que l'agenda 2030 du Cameroun, la SND 30, est le cadre de référence de promotion de la croissance inclusive, équitable et durable dans le soutien de la transformation structurelle de l'économie nationale et dans une démarche soutenable et inclusive. Donc, les leçons tirées des deux précédents examens, 2019 et 2022, peuvent être synthétisées en termes de préalables à satisfaire de la manière suivante. Il est recommandé l'adoption d'une approche inclusive et participative au niveau national, une plus grande responsabilisation des collectivités territoriales décentralisées, l'amélioration du système de collecte des données, qui est quand même le ventre mou de nos différentes évaluations. Il y a la disponibilité des ressources financières pouvant supporter le coût de l'activité. Et puis enfin, la coopération pour l'atteinte des objectifs visés. En termes de coopération, en matière de coopération, nous faisons allusion ici à, comme le dit l'ODD 17, à un mix, à une collaboration entre les parties prenantes nationales, c'est-à-dire le gouvernement, la société civile, le secteur privé, les organisations les ONG et les partenaires multilatéraux et bilatéraux. Merci. On peut passer à... On peut continuer pour prochaine slide. Bien, je vais poursuivre, hein, s'il vous plaît. Ma présentation s'est focalisée sur les ODD retenus pour l'année 2026. Donc, au niveau de l'ODD 6, nous pouvons dire qu'il y a une extension progressive de l'accès à l'eau potable en milieu urbain. Le taux d'accès global passe de 70 pour 2022 à 77 pour 2026. Et non seulement ça, depuis peut-être 2 ans, il y a des projets qui sont développés au niveau des zones rurales où on pense à établir des points d'eau pour satisfaire la demande locale et réduire le gap d'accès entre les zones urbaines et les zones rurales. L'assainissement, nous voyons que c'est beaucoup plus les zones urbaines qui sont concernées et Yaoundé. Donc, il est envisagé d'étendre cette prise en compte, prise en charge de l'assainissement aux grandes villes de l'intérieur, notamment Douala et Garoua. L'ODD 7, il y a des projets de développement hydroélectrique, des projets également sur l'extension du réseau électrique qui sont mis en œuvre. C'est la préoccupation de l'État parce que pour une industrialisation, il est nécessaire, si ce n'est obligatoire, d'avoir une énergie disponible, stable et durable. L'ODD 9, là, nous avons mis l'accent sur le développement des infrastructures, ponts, routes, rails et les ports d'ailleurs. Nous avons déjà un deuxième port qui est le port autonome de Kribi. Le réseau routier est passé de 9 144 km à 10 000 km de routes bitumées. Nous avons également les routes secondaires qui sont entretenues et maintenues. Et puis, nous avons la transformation structurelle, la diversification économique, qui sont les maîtres mots de notre président de la République, qui encourage les jeunes, les femmes par des formations en vue de leur autonomisation économique. L'ODD 11, il y a une amélioration accrue de l'accès aux services urbains. Nous avons parlé de l'eau potable, nous avons parlé des transports, l'énergie, le logement. Et par exemple, il y a la mise en œuvre ou l'opérationnalisation du projet de mobilité urbaine de Douala qui est en cours. Enfin, ODD 17, nous sommes appelés à une coopération plus accrue et diversifiée. Et ça se fait déjà avec les VNR de cette année. Nous avons vu l'implication des volontaires qui ont été appelés, c'était ouvert, ils sont présentés, la société civile a pris le dossier à bras-le-corps. Donc, c'était vraiment une activité partagée et faite de manière inclusive et participative. Slide suivante. Bien, nous avons quand même relevé, il convient de relever que certaines contraintes ont été identifiées et il est nécessaire qu'elles soient levées. Il a mentionné l'insuffisance des données statistiques en rapport avec les ODD. C'est pour cela que nous parlions tantôt, que ma collègue du Sénégal parlait de données agrégées. Nous avons besoin de données spécifiques aux ODD. Et c'est assez difficile d'accès. Et puis ensuite, nous avons les inégalités territoriales que nous devrions lever. On constate que les zones urbaines sont les mieux loties, les plus suivies, au détriment des zones rurales, des zones reculées.
Et madame, vous avez 1 minute, s'il vous plaît.
Oui, tout à fait, tout à fait. Donc, nous avons la faiblesse de la transformation structurelle qui sera sûrement améliorée par la diversification économique. Les améliorations apportées par rapport aux éditions 2019 et 2022, nous avons un recours accru au volontariat, comme je le disais tantôt, le renforcement du système de production des données statistiques. On va faire mieux, mais c'est déjà assez avancé. Il y a la mise en œuvre de la politique d'import-substitution pour la valorisation, la chaîne de valeur liée à la transformation des produits. Il y a une meilleure coordination entre les acteurs à travers des consultations nationales élargies. Nous avons le renforcement de l'innovation, surtout dans les domaines du numérique et du digital. Puis la diversification des sources de financement qui se fait sentir dans la mise en œuvre des projets avec tous les bailleurs et tous les États internationaux, ainsi que le partenariat public-privé. De manière synthétique, voilà ce que je pourrais partager avec nous tous sur ce que le Cameroun fait ou a fait en lien avec les ODD et l'agenda 2063 de l'Union africaine. Je vous remercie.
Merci beaucoup, madame. Applaudissements, s'il vous plaît. Merci pour votre excellente présentation, pour partager l'expérience du Cameroun avec nous. At this moment, we'll move now to Dr. Balgis Osman Elisha. She's the climate change and adaptation expert at the African Development Bank. She has 5 minutes to deliver a presentation on financing for transformative and coordinated actions, opportunities and challenges. Dr. Balgis, you have the floor.
Thank you, Banky. Good afternoon, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'm glad to contribute to this important discussion on financing for transformative and coordinated actions. This topic sits at the heart of Africa's development trajectory, particularly at a time when the continent is navigating multiple crises, including climate change, debt, vulnerability, and food insecurity. In general terms, when we speak about transformation, we always think of these like fundamental change, some fundamental shifts in systems. So it is something that we need to make a complete change, not the normal incremental changes. And in development finance, this means moving beyond incremental project level approaches towards systemic change. In the African context, transformative finance is not only about mobilizing resources or capital. It's also about which is of course very challenging, the resource mobilization, but it's also about aligning this investment with the national priorities, with the sustainable development goals, addressing structural challenges such as debt and ensuring that the finance contribute to equitable and sustainable economic development. And from the perspective of the African Development Bank, transformation responds to the Africa's needs for increasing access to finance and to be deployed in a way that is truly innovative, catalytic, and well coordinated. This is true for public finance, policy reforms, and technical support to shape or to reshape the policies, markets, and enabling low carbon, climate resilient, and inclusive development pathways. So if we ask why do we need transformation, we need it because the current financial architecture is not developing or not delivering at the required scale. And we can see that many African countries spend more in-depth servicing than on essential services such as health and education, which is a situation that makes achieving SDGs impossible without fundamental shift in how finance is structured and deployed. In this regard, there are three priority areas that are critical to create the enabling environment for transformative finance. Number one is reforming the global financial systems or architecture. Number two, unlocking domestic resources. Number three, leveraging public finance to mobilize large-scale private investments. There are huge potential private investments which just need to be mobilized. There are significant opportunities for Africa to scale transformative finance through, number one, tapping climate finance, enhancing access to existing funds to upscale implementation of their NABs, NDCs, LTAs, and climate finance in this regard can act as a powerful catalyst and driver of transformation across sectors such as development sectors, such as energy, agriculture, infrastructure, water, and urban systems. Number two, making use of innovative instruments like blended finance, guarantees, risk-sharing mechanism to de-risk investments and crowd in private capital. In addition, of course, to carbon markets and adaptation-focused mechanism, which offer pathways to unlock new sources of finance. These approaches constitute some of the core features of transformative finance, including systemic change, catalytic leverage, policy integration, and de-risking. Number three, focusing more on regional and programmatic approaches, considering that many of Africa's development challenges require cross-border solutions and regional initiatives that can allow for scale, large scale, and also for efficiency and the creation of bankable investment pipelines. Number four, ensuring alignment with national and global frameworks, including national climate commitments and development plans, essential to ensure coherence and to maximize impacts. Recognizing this, the African Development Bank is actively advancing innovative initiatives and partnerships, including a climate action window, this is an African Development Fund for the low-income countries in Africa, the Africa Climate Change Fund, the African Adaptation Acceleration Program. There is an echo.
Is it better now, Dr. Balgis?
The adaptation benefit mechanism, in addition to its work on green banks, carbon markets, and nature-based solutions. Despite these opportunities, important challenges remain, like there is limited physical space and high cost of capital, which continue to constrain on investments. The financing flows are often fragmented, reducing their effectiveness and limiting integrated solutions, particularly at the nexus of development, adaptation, and disaster risk reductions. There is also a shortage of well-prepared bankable projects due to capacity and data constraints. At the time where adaptation is critical for Africa, and the adaptation finance remains significantly underfunded. To move forward, several priorities must be addressed. We need to scale concessional and catalytic finance to unlock private investment. We need to strengthen vertical and horizontal coordination at global, regional, and national levels by moving toward an integrated financing architecture that brings together Rio Convention's development and disaster risk finance initiatives. We should increase investment in project preparation and institutional capacity to build robust pipelines. In parallel, advancing carbon markets and innovative adaptation mechanisms with critical to scaling impact. Strengthening and achieving partnership are equally important, as no single institution can deliver transformation alone, and strong collaboration across government, development partners, and the private sector is essential. In conclusion, financing transformative and coordinated action is both an opportunity and an imperative for Africa. Success will depend on our ability to scale finance, strengthen coordination, and deliver real systematic transformation on the ground. Thank you. Of course, the African Development Bank stands ready to work with all partners to advance this agenda toward more resilient, inclusive, sustainable future for Africa. Thank you again.
Thank you so much, Dr. Balgis from the African Development Bank, and thank you for the commitment of the bank to further these two agendas. Can we please give her a round of applause? So, our next speaker, I'd like to call on Dr. Gilson Pina, National Director for Planning of Capo Verde. Dr. Pina, we will be interested in hearing key lessons that have emerged from Capo Verde's VNR processes, as well as one or two game-changing and coordinated actions that could help fast-track progress towards the goals of both agendas. Any reflections you might have on financing, given we just came from Dr. Balgis's presentation, would also be appreciated. However, Dr. Pina, you do have 5 minutes. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much for the floor. Actually, in Cape Verde, or can you hear me?
Yes, very well.
Yes, okay,
Thank you.
yeah, okay, that's great. So actually, our VNR process was very participative with the coordination here at Ministry of Finance, more concretely at National Directorate of Planning, but with the participation of all stakeholders, private sectors, civil society, all ONGs, and also the international partners, include the United Nations system that can support special food preparation of the process, but including to give the inputs and also the revision of the document. We start early the process last year, but the main work was done during the beginning of this year with this workshop and also the articulation with all stakeholders. We have the coordination, as I mentioned, here at the ministry level, but of course the full work was done with support from the other stakeholders. For each SDGs, we have one coordination, one focal point here at the ministry, but the line ministries were, let me say, concentrate in terms of coordination to prepare the report for each SDGs, and of course to have this coordination sectorally, but including all stakeholders based on the importance for each stakeholders can have each SDGs. At the end, of course we did this coordination to put all documentation together, and when we finalized the report, we send it back again. We send back again to the line ministries to confirm, and then we send also to all stakeholders, include, as I mentioned before, the United Nations, that can do the revision of the document, but also to see if it was aligned for what we discussed. I didn't mention before, we had a lot of workshops, general workshop for to share the document, the process, but also we have a specific workshop for each group and for each SDGs. Of course, it was a great progress. We have intervention and also the financial support from the UN system. That was great at the beginning. We have one committee, was still, I cannot call it steering committee, but it's a committee that it's a joint committee between government, civil society, and the United Nations system, that all of us we have this co-chair to support the process. So after this implementation and also the articulation, we conclude our document. It was validated. We had some delay due to the election process, because we had to start the organization of the workshop during the campaign, because it's mandatory by law in Cape Verde. But as soon it was concluded, we start again the process and we conclude the document that we share the presentation. We face a couple of difficulties, as I mentioned, because of course this to see how we can ask the engagement of all stakeholders and to ask them to be part of the process. It was quite hard in the beginning, but after that it was complete assumed for all of us, all the stakeholders. It will, let me say, this document can clear show the vision, not from government side, but from Cape Verde as an entire nation. So all of us, we can review this document to say this is a Cape Verde document. Of course, this document will be shared to all, and all we will see all documentation, but we still need now to continue with engagement, not only to see the results, but we need to see how we can use now the process to finance the entire SDGs, to see we can achieve all the goals that we propose. The main of one is the eradication of extreme poverty in Cape Verde. That is for 2030, but we want to anticipate it in Cape Verde to see there's no extreme poverty in Cape Verde, but we still need to now we can see the engagement of international partners to support us on this process to achieve our SDGs. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Pina, for those very valuable insights. Can you please give him a round of applause? And also terrific timekeeping on your end. All right.
Just one question.
Yes, please.
Please apologize for my voice. This is because Cape Verde in a World Cup. So.
Oh! Fantastic.
Okay, thank you.
We all rejoice with you. Utku, did you want to say something? I saw your hand before we move on. No?
No, I just wanted to congratulate.
Yes. Please, can we give a round of applause for Cape Verde? I know it's VNR, but we can appreciate. All right. Now, I would now like to invite Mr. Boima Soni, Deputy Director for Statistics of Liberia, to take the floor. Mr. Soni, could you share some lessons learned on coordination, particularly in relation to data collection and management for the VNR process? We would also appreciate hearing about one or two transformative coordinated actions that could help accelerate progress towards the achievement of both the agendas. Mr. Soni, the floor is yours, and again, you have 5 minutes. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. It's always a pleasure sharing such a platform with the people that we have on board. Actually, I have also shared my presentation, and I hope you have it later, but I'm having some more technical glitches in connecting my laptop, so I'll be speaking to you directly from my phone. So from our end in Liberia, actually from my presentation, I have it in 3 perspectives, but I will focus mainly on Liberia perspective. So the three perspectives that I prepared earlier was the global perspective, the African continent perspective, and that of Liberia's perspective on the SDG 6, 7, 9, 11, and 17. But my focus will be mainly on Liberia's perspective. So the gap between policy ambition and our delivery capacity at the local level is actually at the mainly hinged on the limited fiscal resources, water and sanitation functionalities, limited electricity access, and high energy costs. And some of the permanent and pertinent issues that we are also facing with the issue of inadequate transportation, limited industrial development, and digital connectivity gaps. Like I said, I already indicated that. I've already said my presentation on a laptop, but connectivity issue is giving problem. So I have to refer to my data, on my personal data, to make sure that I'm linked to this particular presentation. The issue of rapid urbanization pressures on housing, drainage, waste management, and land use is also a problem that Liberia is faced with. The need for stronger partnership, coordination, financing, and data availability cannot be overly emphasized. And so some of the key things that we are focusing on, we may also recommend from the Liberia perspective, Africa and the global perspective, is the issue of sustainability, which is often at risk when maintenance and financing, local capacity, institutional ownership, and accountability are not embedded from the very onset. And so this particular high-level forum come at a very right time. Some of the policy issues at the institutional level that we may also look at Liberia for Liberia perspective is to strengthen integrated planning, budgeting, and monitoring across institutions, using the VNR as a management tool to deliver quick results. And some of the things that we think could be leveraged, the use of the VNR to align sector plans, county priorities, because Liberia is at disaggregated at county level from the country or county, and it's further disaggregated to district and clans. So we also trying to look at the issue of establishing a stronger SDG delivery coordination mechanism linked to the national budget cycle with clear rules for all stakeholders at all levels. For Liberia's case, the SDG is actually championed by the Ministry of Finance and Development Planning, which is the board chair for the Statistics House in Liberia, and co-chaired by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. And we are giving support for the issue of data gatherings to support the evidence. And to also strengthen data system through our entity listed, the NSO in Liberia, and sector ministries to produce regular high-frequency data for tracking and decision-making. So we also want to place a priority tag on the quick impact accelerators, such as rehabilitate non-functional water systems, expand off-grid and renewable energy in rural areas, improve urban drainage and waste management, and also to strengthen public-public partnership as the last goal for the SDG. And for the third component or for the third part that we may take a look at, mainly, like I said, focusing on Liberia's perspective, is the issue of financing, which is a priority constraint for expanding energy, rural, water, sanitation, and resilient urban infrastructure. And so one of the key areas that we may really like to focus will be the issue of the primary constraint, which is limited financing. Also, the second portion that we may also take a look at, or we may single out for the local level, is also a key challenge coordination, which is coordination and implementation challenges. And some of the needs that we may look at in this area are stronger project management, improved data systems, better coordination and collaboration within the sector, and stronger institutional capacity, and obviously the issue of accountability and transparency. And lastly, from our side, for Liberia, the ministers, mainly for those sector ministries and agencies, should prioritize financing, strengthen data systems and coordination, and focus on measurable implementation milestones. So some of the key focus, major focus areas I may emphasize: increased financing, and strengthen national statistical system to support evidence-based decision-making, improve coordination among government institutions and development partners, and focus on achieving measurable milestones over the next 12 to 24 months. And so my concluding statement, I may say the discussion from the VNR and Africa Day underscores a common message across the globe, the continent and the national level. Achieving SDGs require moving beyond commitments and accelerating implementation. While financing remains a critical challenge, particularly for infrastructure, energy, water, sanitation, and resilient urban development, it must be complemented by stronger institutions, effective coordination, robust data system, and greater accountability. So to accelerate program depend on aligning planning, budgeting, and monitoring processes, strengthening partnership, like I indicated earlier, investing in reliable, disaggregated data, and prioritize high impact interventions to improve the data ecosystem, which will further bring about improvement in the lives of the people. So again, I'd like to say thank you, and let me stop here because I see the timekeeper watching me. And thank you so much, and I'm really glad that I'm part of this forum and wish to collaborate further. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Sonny. Can we please give him a round of applause? Thank you for those insights that you have shared from the experience of Liberia. The organizers would like you to know that the presentations and documents from this event will all be shared on the event website, so please do be on the lookout for it. J'invite maintenant Monsieur Sawaba Ale du Togo à prendre la parole. Monsieur Ale, pourriez-vous nous faire part des principaux enseignements tirés de l'examen national volontaire du Togo? Nous serions également intéressés de connaître une ou deux actions transformatrices et coordonnées qui, selon vous, pourraient accélérer la mise en œuvre des deux agendas. Vous disposez de 5 minutes pour votre intervention. Vous avez la parole. Monsieur Ale.
Alors, bonsoir, madame.
Bonsoir.
Bon, vous allez m'excuser, je n'ai pas préparé une présentation PowerPoint compte tenu du temps. Et par rapport au Togo, je vais être un peu plus bref parce qu'actuellement, nos documents sont déjà postés en ce que je sache. Le Sawaba du Togo au ministère de la Planification. Par rapport au Togo, l'expérience du Togo pour les VNR, il faut noter que le Togo est dans sa 5e VNR, c'est-à-dire qu'il prépare actuellement. Donc, le premier rapport a été élaboré en 2013, le deuxième en 2017, le troisième en 2018, le quatrième en 2022. Et actuellement, nous avons déjà élaboré le 5 qui va être présenté juillet à New York. Par rapport à l'expérience du Togo, je vais relever principalement l'implication de l'ensemble des acteurs. Et comme les principes des ODD le soulignent, l'implication, c'est un élément très fondamental pour ne laisser personne de côté. Et l'implication surtout de la société civile. Donc, dans ce cadre, qu'est-ce que le Togo a fait? Déjà depuis 2015, après l'adoption, 2016, nous avons fait la priorisation des ODD à travers l'ensemble, sous toute l'étendue du territoire, au niveau central comme dans les régions. Donc, ça nous a permis de prioriser les ODD et de l'intégrer dans notre plan national de développement, qui est l'outil qui nous permet vraiment de mettre en œuvre les ODD. Qu'est-ce que nous avons également fait pour assurer la participation de l'ensemble de la société civile? Donc, nous avons amené la société civile à créer une plateforme qu'ils ont appelé, c'est-à-dire un groupe qu'ils ont appelé la plateforme des OSC ODD. Donc, cette plateforme regroupe plusieurs associations et ces associations, il y a tous les types d'associations, elles sont diversifiées. Donc, ils travaillent ensemble là-bas, ils retiennent les informations qu'ils veulent communiquer ou bien qu'ils veulent porter pour leur compte et ils ont un seul facilitateur. Et c'est le facilitateur-là qui porte maintenant leur voix aux côtés du gouvernement pour que leur action soit également capitalisée. Donc, c'est vraiment ça qui nous aide à ce qu'on puisse prendre en compte suffisamment la contribution des OSC et des ODD parce que nous inviter ou bien reconnaître toutes les OSC et les ODD au niveau national. Donc, à travers cette plateforme, ils travaillent et on a de façon globalisée ou bien synthétisée leurs contributions que nous mettons dans les rapports forums politiques de haut niveau que nous préparons. Notre expérience également, c'est que l'élaboration de ce rapport est coordonnée par le ministère de la Planification. Donc, le ministère de la Planification étant un ministère de coordination, nous avons la capacité de convier l'ensemble des acteurs à des réunions et pour pouvoir capitaliser les informations actualisées. Et le ministère également a sous son tutelle l'INSED, l'Institut national des statistiques, qui permettent également de voir les données que nous utilisons et de certifier ces données pour qu'on puisse avoir un rapport de qualité. Maintenant, par rapport à ce 5e rapport, nous avons vraiment identifié certains défis que nous voulons vraiment relever à travers cet examen que nous venons de faire. Un des défis, c'est de valoriser vraiment le rôle des collectivités territoriales. Comme vous savez très bien, on dit pour réussir la mise en œuvre des ODD, ça doit se faire au niveau local. Donc aujourd'hui, il faut valoriser le rôle des collectivités territoriales pour que on puisse vraiment combattre les inégalités territoriales. Un autre défi, c'est l'accélération des résultats visibles. Il faut que les résultats de nos investissements, tout ce que nous faisons comme projet d'investissement, soit visible pour la population. Dans ce sens, il faut que nous renforcions davantage la gouvernance qui va être orientée vers les impacts. Et un autre défi, c'est vraiment la diversification des partenariats pour qu'on puisse vraiment mobiliser suffisamment les ressources et permettre vraiment une mise en œuvre réussie de nos ODD à travers nos plans nationaux de développement, qui est notre instrument de mise en œuvre des ODD et également de l'agenda 2063 de l'Union africaine. Et chaque année, nous élaborons également des rapports ODD parallèlement au rapport forum politique de haut niveau, au niveau de notre sous-région, c'est-à-dire le mois, nous élaborons chaque année des rapports ODD et ces rapports ODD nous permettent en même temps, lorsque nous sommes invités pour les rapports forum politique de haut niveau, d'avoir rapidement les informations et pouvoir aller très vite dans l'élaboration de notre rapport forum politique de haut niveau. Madame, voilà un peu de façon synthétique ce que je peux dire par rapport à l'expérience du Togo. Je vous remercie.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur Ale. Please give him a round of applause for that. Merci, merci, merci pour votre excellente présentation et pour avoir partagé l'expérience du Togo avec nous. À ce moment-ci, at this time, I would like to check if Mr. William Herman Mate from Tanzania is on the call. Mr. Mate, are you online? Mr. William from Tanzania? If you're on the call, can you please identify yourself? Okay. If not, I'd like to move on to Mrs. Fadumo Mumin from Somalia to kindly share lessons learned from Somalia's VNR experience and any transformative and coordinated action that can accelerate the achievement. Okay, I see Mr. William. Okay. Sorry, Mr. Fadumo. Mr. William, would you like to take the floor for 5 minutes before we move on to the experience of Somalia? Mr. William? Hello, Mr. William, can you take the floor? Okay. Ms. Fadumo, Mr. William, are you able to speak?
Yes, why not? I'm speaking.
Okay, we couldn't hear you. I think you were not, you were
Now
on
you hear
mute.
me?
Perfectly, perfectly. All right, please kindly share the experience of Tanzania with us. You have 5 minutes, please.
Okay, my name is William Mate. William Mate from Tanzania National Bureau of Statistics. I'm principal statistician. The experience of VNR, as of today, we've already prepared, this is the third VNR report we are going to prepare. The first one, it was 1990. The second, it was 1923. I'm going direct to the lesson learned because it's almost the same as other, which has been presented by other African countries. But as per Tanzania, preparation of VNR, we learned that the early planning improve coordinations. We needed to plan early before we start the process of preparing the VNR. So early planning improve coordination. Another lesson learned is reliable data is very important, is very essential. Strong national statistical system are crucial for monitoring SDG progress, identify gaps, and supporting evidence-based policy decisions. Continued investment in data production, integration, and dissemination is very important. Another lesson learned is multiple stakeholders engagement strengthens ownership. Broad participation, enhanced transparency, promotes shared responsibility, and improves quality and acceptance of the VNR findings and the recommendation. Another lesson learned is strong institutional coordination is very crucial. Effective collaboration among government institutions and development partners improve implementation, avoids overlapping efforts, and strengthens accountability. Another lesson learned from preparation of VNR is sustainable financing remains essential. Achieving the SDG requires adherence domestic resource mobilization, efficient public expenditure, private sector participation, and continued support from development partners. As conclusion, from what we have learned, Tanzania's VNR preparation demonstrated the inclusive participation, strong government leadership, reliable data, and effective institutional coordination are very important. The high quality are very essential for high quality SDG reporting and implementation. The experience also highlighted the needs to strengthen financing, statistical systems, and partnership to accelerate progress toward the 2030 agenda while ensuring no one is left behind. Thank you, Madam.
Thank you so much, Mr. William. Can you please give him a round of applause? And thank you for being, straight to the point and for really highlighting those key messages that came out of Tanzania's process. Colleagues, we are looking at time and we are acknowledged that we are running short on time, but we do still have so many people on the line with rich experiences to share. So we will take the experience from Mrs. Fadumo Mumin from Somalia to please share with us. While she's taking the floor, we would like to remind you to kindly put any questions you have for any of the participants, any of the panelists in the chat box so that we can respond to them. Ms. Fadumo, you have 5 minutes.
Thank you so much. Are you able to hear me?
Very well.
Very good. Thank you so much. So Somalia is presenting its second voluntary national review report this year. We presented our first one in 2022. And so both reports, the first and second VNR, is actually led by the Somali National Bureau of Statistics, which has been coordinating the whole VNR process. There's definitely a stronger focus on data, or this VNR is certainly more data robust compared to the first VNR report. Actually, SDG data availability in Somalia, because of all of the work that the National Bureau of Statistics has been doing since the first VNR, we're also a relatively new institution. We were established in 2020, but data availability for SDGs has gone up from 39% to 2020 in 2022 when we presented the first VNR to 70% this year. So this VNR is definitely more data robust compared to the first VNR. And this has helped us provide a stronger evidence base for assessing progress and identifying gaps, and of course, informing policy making as well, policy decisions. So while important progress has been made, our mandate, of course, is to produce surveys and censuses, but our context in Somalia, we heavily rely on donor support and development partner financing. And so when we're in a situation where that's not available, we're not able to do as many censuses and surveys. So there's been a strong reliance this time on administrative data for this VNR. And expanding the use of administrative data, which is of course more regular and less costly. So data from ministries and digital information management systems, including the Ministry of Education and Health, have significantly strengthened the availability and timeliness of SDG data. And a lesson learned there has been the mapping exercises, the data mapping exercises that we have done with these ministries in leading up to this VNR and producing this VNR. So certainly there needs to be we've realized, continuous investment in administrative data, not just on producing censuses and surveys. And as SNBS, we are coordinators of the National Statistical System. In terms of consultations, this VNR has been a richer review process. The consultations have been broader, certainly broader and whole of society. There were groups that were not consulted during the first VNR that are consulted in this VNR, such as engaging persons with disabilities and disability groups, labor groups, and then the private sector, women, youth, and academia, and of course, development partners as well as government institutions. So, yeah, combining both robust data and this inclusive consultations has definitely produced a more credible and nationally owned and evidence-based VNR the second time round that is able to help us better monitor progress towards the SDGs, and of course use the VNR also as a national instrument to be able to review progress in our national transformation plan, which is already very well aligned with the SDGs. Yeah, so broader participation strengthens national ownership and accountability as well through this VNR. Thank you.
Thank you so very much, Mrs. Mumin, for the succinct and very insightful things you've shared from Somalia. I was very impressed to hear of how the difference between where you were in your first VNR and where you are now in terms of data collection for this particular one. Please give her a round of applause. At this time, we're going to hear from Miss Augustine Boassa from Gabon on the experiences of Gabon on VNR, and then we'll have two more, and we hope to round up at 15 minutes past the hour. Miss Boassa, you have the floor, please. Okay. Miss Augustine Boassa, are you on the call? Are you still on the call? Yes, I see you. Are you able to take the floor? Are you able to speak? Okay. Thank you very much. You have the floor to share the experiences from Gabon. You have 5 minutes, please. Hello, are you able to unmute yourself? Okay, it seems we're having some difficulties from Ms. Boasa. Can we move on then to Ms. Mkumbeni, who is a researcher at the International Security Studies, to share on perspectives from the African youth and civil society on transformative and coordinated actions for the two agendas. You have 5 minutes, please, Ms. Mkumbeni.
Hi, colleagues, and thank you so much for the opportunity. I would just like to first begin by reflecting on the momentum that we've made towards the 2030 agenda as well as the 2063. I think we are at a moment where we really need to determine what does actual transformation really mean. And I believe that what we need to do then is to look at VNRs as not just a test of not just as an exercise, a policy exercise, but it should be whether that transformation is actualizing. It should be a test of whether it changes implementation, budget decisions, as well as delivery for communities, especially those who are at most risk of being left behind. And I think we are here because, again, VNRs they aren't just a paper exercise, but they are a tool that can touch lives. They help shape young people, jobs, whether young people get jobs, whether rural communities get water, whether young women can participate in their own futures. So the question is not just about whether a government has produced a comprehensive report, but it should be a question of whether that review then accelerates change, right? And I think the most critical point I wanted to raise today is that while African countries have ambitious strategies linked to both Agenda 2063 and the 2030 agenda, it's not just that the transformation happens at a policy level, but it happens at subnational level. The delivery happens there. It happens in rural water systems. It happens in informal settlements where young people need work. It happens in communities that are adjusting to climate shocks, and in local markets where women trade. So implementation needs to then, it requires that kind of subnational resourcing then, and coordination should be then at a local level. And accountability mechanisms should be including communities as well. Without this kind of practice, then visionary policy even remains a commitment rather than a tool for change in people's lives. And when we talk about VNRs, it's critical that we ensure that it is accompanied with genuine inclusion from design, not just at validation stage. So communities, it's great to hear from some of the presentations today that communities have been included, and which is great because VNRs are, when they become a technical exercise, it actually misses lived reality. And that is what's most important. I've also been hearing a little bit about disaggregated data, and this is also very important because it reveals who is being left behind. And we talk about, for instance, a country might show progress on SDG 7 on energy, but in rural areas, youth might like reliable energy for school, work, or safety, and women might still spend hours on collecting fuel. So a national average doesn't really mean much if it doesn't show who is being left behind. And I talk about young people because they also matter in this agenda. They matter and they are beneficiaries and can be stewards and are stewards in this agenda. And linking this again to the concept of intergenerational justice, right? That young people are not just the people that we mention in passing, but they are citizens, they are innovators, they are workers, they are researchers like myself. And in these conversations, we are also part of shaping the policies. We're part of the determining jobs and resilience and on opportunities for decades and today. And when we talk about Agenda 2063, it reminds us that Africa must be driven by its people. And when we talk about VNRs as well, it's important that the civil societies, the NGOs, and the organizations that are working on the ground are not just the validators, but they are active participants in generating evidence on what's working, supporting institutions, supporting partnerships that strengthen implementation. And today we've spoken about financing quite a lot. Have we ever asked ourselves whether financing is coordinated? This is something I'm bringing to the fore today. Are subnational governments adequately resourced in order for us to track exactly what is being spent on? Because when we talk about SDG 7, 6, 9, and 17, the issue is not just about fundraising ambition, but it's about implementation capacity, the means to implement the coordination, the resource deployment, especially at a local level. And a credible VNR needs to show what governments want to achieve and how should these priorities be then financed. What are the gaps, and does the current spending align with the delivery of the SDG? And looking ahead to the 2026 UN Water Conference, we've seen in the past, about 4 weeks ago when we had the Africa Dialogue series, that the key messaging there was that water shouldn't only be an environmental issue, but it's fundamental to security, food security, energy security, public health, economic transformation, climate resilience, and peace. And oftentimes we see that there is quite a lot of fragmentation with implementation. And the financing conversations also then happen in that way. They happen separately in planning. Climate policies are developed independently from development planning, water, infrastructure, and urban development. But those are not separate sectors because the reality is communities and people on the ground experience them as interconnected challenges. So they don't experience SDG 6, 7, 9, 11, or even 17 individually. They experience them together. And that's precisely why today transformative and coordinated action matters. Especially for the next phase of Africa's development trajectory. It should be defined by implementation at scale, implementation that is coordinated, needs to be adequately financed, it has to be locally driven, and it also should place people at the center, not measuring by partnerships we have, not measuring by the policies that we have, but it should be measured by whether a young person can find meaningful work, whether communities can adapt to a climate shock, whether women can participate in the economy, whether institutions can be held accountable. Thank you. I will just end by saying this, that whether we are closer to Agenda 2063, it means that we have to keep people at the center of implementation and pursue coordinated action with purpose and intention so that the 2030 agenda and the 2063 agenda are not parallel commitments, but they are a shared pathway towards the Africa that we really want. Leave it there.
Thank you so much, Ms. Mkumbeni, for those remarks. Please give her a round of applause. Very insightful. We need to keep people at the center of everything that we do. I'm told that Ms. Maela Mapoisa is online now. She's the National Monitoring and Evaluation Deputy Director and VNR Focal Point of Mozambique. and she was going to share with us reflections on key lessons from Mozambique's VNR experience. And if one of the questions we've been asked on the group chat or on the chat is, how can we help countries to support how can we support countries in strengthening their statistical systems? So perhaps if you can reflect on this as you give your intervention, that will be much appreciated. Ms. Mapoisa, you have the floor, please. And you have 5 minutes. Ms. Maela? Ms. Maela, you're muted. Okay. Ms. Maela, UNDP, can you please get ready? We'll be coming to you shortly.
Sure.
All right, we can't hear from Ms. Maela on Mozambique. I'm not sure what's happening. So we'll kindly go over to Mr. Usman Ali Iftikhar. He's the Policy Advisor, Inclusive Growth and Extractives team of UNDP's Regional Service Center for Africa. He's going to spend 5 minutes, and he's the last presenter, talking about acceleration actions at the national and local levels, best practices and scaling up opportunities from VNR to VLR evidence and collective action and implementation at scale. And Usman, if you can talk on issues of how to strengthen statistical capacities, that would also be most helpful. Thank you so much. Over to you, please, 5 minutes.
And I will aim not to disappoint you, Banke. And thank you very much to you, and thank you to the Office of the Special Advisor for Africa, the African Union Commission, the UNECA, AFDB, and all colleagues for this important discussion. I'm pleased to join on behalf of UNDP, and I noticed that I'm probably the last speaker, so I will not try to repeat the rich points already made by member states and partners. Instead, I will offer a short framing around accelerated actions at the national and local level, and I heard quite a few presentations getting into both of those. So the central question is actually quite simple, is how do we move from review to action and from action to implementation at scale? For UNDP, VNRs, and even voluntary local reviews are not only reporting instruments. At their best, they are diagnostic and implementation tools. They can help countries and local governments understand where progress is stuck, what constraints are truly binding, and how governments, partners, communities, and financing actors can organize the collective action around these constraints. So my main message is that acceleration will depend less on adding more priorities and more on making sharper choices around a few constraints that are blocking progress. Next slide. So let me actually do something different here. Let me actually begin with the 3 messages that we may wish to carry forward to the ministers. So my first message is that VNRs and VLRs should increasingly be treated as implementation mechanism, not only reporting mechanism. The value of a review is not only that it tells us what has happened. I think the real value is that it helps governments and partners decide what needs to be fixed, financed, and scaled next. Second, we need to go deeper on binding constraint. I think we should be careful not to assume that we already know what is holding back progress. In many cases, what we see are symptoms. For example, low execution, fragmented projects, weak data, limited fiscal space, climate shocks, or even uneven local delivery. But the binding constraint might sit underneath these symptoms, and they may be institutional, fiscal, regulatory, political economy, territorial, or even linked to coordination failure. My third point is that acceleration requires collective action around these constraints. No single institution can deliver the SDGs alone or Agenda 26. What matters is whether finance, institutions, data, local delivery, and partnerships are aligned behind a country-owned pathway. The next generations of VNRs should therefore report not only better evidence, but stronger delivery. The reason this matters is that fragmentation is not a neutral idea. It slows delivery. Africa has strong ambitions. We know that. We have Agenda 2063. We have the SDGs. We have national development plans, sector strategies, local development plans, financing frameworks, and many partner support initiatives. But the challenge is that these not always come together as a coherent delivery system. When action is fragmented, oversight becomes weaker, duplication increases, accountability becomes unclear, financing is spread thinly across many priorities. Data systems do not speak to each other. Local implementation is disconnected from national planning, and the development partners may unintentionally reinforce fragmentation if support is not organized around shared country priorities. This is why the delivery gap is not only a financing issue, it is a coordination and collective action issue. The figures on this slide help make the point. Whether we look at Agenda 26 implementation or SDG progress, the message is clear. The pace of delivery is not matching the scale of ambition. So the question is simply not how to add more activities. The question is how to organize collective actions around a few constraints that, if addressed, could unlock progress across a whole slew of SDGs at the same time. This is where the VNR and VLRs can, in my opinion, really play a much stronger role. The VNR process has already become a major part of the SDG follow-up architecture. But, as countries move into third and fourth and even fifth reviews, the question is changing. The question is no longer what progress has been made. The question is increasingly, why is progress not moving faster? And what would unlock implementation? This requires deeper diagnosis. First, reviews should help identify binding constraint across the SDGs under review. Second, and I'm speeding up over here, VLRs are essential because there are many constraints become visible only at the local level. Cities and territories are where people experience service gap, where firms operate, where infrastructure either works or fails, and where climate risk often materializes. Third, reviews should help prioritize. Acceleration cannot mean doing everything at once. It means choosing a few constraints where action can unlock the largest multiplier. Fourth, priorities need to be aligned with budgets, institutions, local delivery systems, and partner support. And finally, national and local lessons need to be elevated into clear ministerial messages and partnership ask. And so on my final slide, and basically this is where UNDP is currently innovating quite a bit, especially on the area of portfolios. So if fragmentation is part of the problem, then the response cannot be more individual projects, obviously. We need ways of organizing collective action around system. And this is what portfolios help do. First, they allow countries and partners to work around the systems, not silos. The SDGs under review are deeply interconnected, as we've been hearing. Water, energy, infrastructure, cities, innovation, jobs, resilience, partnerships are not separate agenda. They're part of one implementation system. Second, a portfolio approach aligns actors around a shared constraint. Governments, local authority, UN entities, international financial institutions, the private sector, civil societies, and communities each play different roles, but around the same problem. Third, portfolios combine instrument. Some constraints require policy reform, some require financing, Others require institutional capacity, data systems, innovation, or local delivery mechanism. The point is to sequence these instruments together rather than deploy them separately. Fourth, portfolios create space to learn and adapt. Not every intervention will work immediately. We know that. But a portfolio allows countries and partners to test, learn, course correct, and scale what works. And finally, portfolios help shift the focus from isolated pilots to implementation pathways. This is essential if we want the next round of VNRs and VLRs to show not only the countries have reviewed progress, but that they have accelerated delivery. So my closing message, Banke, is this. Best practice is not a single model. It is a discipline of aligning collective action behind country-owned priorities, grounded in deep diagnosis, connected to local realities, and organized through integrated systems approaches. And with that, I thank you.
Thank you so very much, Usman, for that excellent presentation. Please let's give him a round of applause. Thank you so much. At this juncture, colleagues, thank you so much for your active engagement so far, for listening, for being here. We note that there were 2 questions that were directed to Senegal, to Madame Bousso, but I don't think she's still on the call. But perhaps these questions can be sent to her and we can find a way to get the answers to the people who have asked for it. A reminder that all the presentations will be made available on the website for you to be able to view. Also, in terms of technical support that can be provided to strengthen statistical systems, I think organizations like the Economic Commission for Africa, we do have an Africa Center for Statistics that provides capacity building for member states. So please feel free to reach out to the ECA in that regard. But at this point, we note the time, and on behalf of the co-organizers, the UNDP, the African Union Commission, the African Development Bank, the Economic Commission for Africa, and of course, OSA, we want to say a big thank you for being here. We say thank you to all the countries, all the panelists who have shared their rich experiences. We'd like to say that the conversation does not end here, and would like to invite everyone that would be in New York for the HLPF to the African Union Permanent Observer Mission for Africa Day, the in-person ministerial segment, which will take place on the 15th of July at 9 a.m. From the HLPF, of course, we will still see at the 2026 UN Water Conference in December. Again, a big thank you to everyone for staying with us so far. We had a very, very rich conversations, and the notes will capture this. Thank you. We wish you a great evening, and we wish that we continue to achieve the Africa we want and that no one is left behind.